Welcome into Other People's Shoes. As you know, I'm your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining me this week. So excited to share with you. We are in our 7th season. I say we because you, the listener, are right along with me in this journey, I hope. So I want to ask you this question before we get started on today's episode, and that is this question of how do you see me? Now, not me like me, the host, but how do you see others around you? In fact, you've probably heard it said that you can't get a second chance on a first impression. So I'm curious about this. When you meet somebody for the first time, what do you notice first? Is it their eyes? Is it their hair? Is it their shoes? Is it their skin color? And I got to share with you, our guests that we're going to have this season have something very special deep down inside of them that you and I are going to discover together. And I cannot wait to share that with you. We're going to look beyond what you see on the outside of the person, and we are going to look deep inside to find that treasure that is hidden in each and every one of my guests this season. So I hope you will join me as we walk in other people's shoes.
Hey, come take a walk with me, not like you used to do something different and put yourself in other people's shoes. Open up your mind and open up your eyes and change your direction, change your perspective.
Welcome into Other People's Shoes. As you know, I'm your host, Neil Matthews. So, it's not every day you get to hear somebody on, do we still have them? MP3 players? Does anybody still have one of those? So I remember this back in the day. I had, an iPod Nano, and it had a screen on it. Well, at the time I was working for a cell phone company, and we had come out with these cases that fit on it. So, of course, I had a North Carolina case on mine. Just full disclosure, it's probably somewhere in a box, I'm sure. But this guy that I'm going to invite you into hearing right now was on that iPod Nano. And it was on repeat. This song that he sang was on repeat for about a week straight. And we're going to get into why. But let me introduce you to him right now. He is a husband, of course. He's a dad of 4. And I believe he's still living in the Nashville area. So immediately when you hear of Nashville, I think of 2 things. I think of country western. That's what my father-in-law calls it. I just call it country. And I also think of Nashville is kind of this epicenter for Christian music. So maybe we'll get into that too. He's a communicator. He's a singer. He's a songwriter. He's a speaker. He's a writer. Oh, and he's also a Bible teacher. So be careful. Class is in session. Let's get ready to meet my next guest. Help me welcome him in, Shaun Groves. Shaun, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Shaun, was that a rock star welcome?
I wouldn't have agreed to be with you if I knew you were such a North Carolina fan.
Oh, there it comes out. I was waiting for that. Is that an issue?
I'm not that into college sports. I don't really like to see boys play. If I was, I would have to back some school out of Texas. Obviously, that's where I'm from.
Well, I know you're from that Baylor area. You cannot tell me right now that you're rooting for the Baylor Bears still, though, right? Are you?
I'm really not that into sports.
I know you're not. I actually,
other than professional football.
Are you a Titans fan?
I'm not. Weirdly, I'm a Steelers fan.
Okay.
Isn't that weird?
That is weird, but that's okay. So who's your favorite Steeler? Let's settle that maybe right now if we can.
All time, it would probably be Mean Joe Green, and Troy Polamalu would be a close second.
Yeah, those are some good cats. So I'm trying to think of a Steeler that I really liked. Rod Woodson was pretty good. Who else? Barry Foster. I think back in the day he was their running back, and of course Neil O'Donnell led them to the Super Bowl. Of course they lost to the Cowboys, but we don't need to talk about that. It's fine. So I actually grew up with some pretty good diehard Steelers fans, so I would always give them a bad time. Like, you haven't been good since Terry Bradshaw. Stop crying. So
there are a lot of us.
There are. So that's okay. So Shaun, before we get going too far down the road, what size shoes do you wear?
A 10, though. As I'm getting older, my foot is flattening out. So my last pair was a 10.5.
That's easy to fit in. I wear a 10.5 also. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So is there a certain style or brand that you like more than another?
I'm almost always in a pair of boots.
Okay. So is there...
Now, the last tour that so nowadays I speak on other people's tours.
Right.
And the last tour I was on was with the very generous and talented Annie Downs. and she gave all of us on the tour an end of tour gift, which was a black pair of Vans, which I call my Vannies
Nice.
in honor of Annie Downs. And apparently my teenagers say that's really cool. So I try to wear those around them and their friends. But otherwise, I'm usually sporting a pair of boots.
Okay. I do have some Vans on my wall. If you're interested, they are 10 and a half. They are used. So just to help you out. So when I started the show also, I forgot to tell you this, but when I started the show, I wanted a used pair of shoes, right? Because we're going to be in other people's shoes. So our logo, if you look closely, kind of maybe squint a little bit, it might look like a pair of Vans, maybe. Because, copyright issues and all that. It might look like maybe a pair of Wish Vans, if you will. I wish I was watching a bunch of... Anyway, so I got these used pair of Vans because I wanted a new used pair of shoes. I wanted someone else's Vans, if you will. So there you go.
Very clever.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's cool. So I know you are in that Nashville area still. Did we get that right?
I am, yeah.
Okay, so if we came out to visit, which hopefully we would be welcome to do that. I don't know. Maybe the Baylor comment, the Steelers thing, maybe just derailed that. I don't know. I hope not. But
if you're not wearing your North Carolina gear, you're welcome.
Ooh. That's going to be tough, my friend, because usually every day I have something. Well, I always have something light blue on, as you can. Well, the people can't see, but it's bad. The watch is light blue. I have a running ID bracelet that's light blue also. Anyway, that might be tough. But if we were to come out to visit and I agreed in principle without signing contracts to not wear something North Carolina related, where would you take us around Nashville? Like, where's your favorite place to go?
Nowhere exciting, man. I'm really a homebody. This is a great city for live music. So I'd probably just find out what you're into. If you're into coffee, there are a couple of really great places for a good cup of coffee. We've got a Crema, we've got a Just Love Coffee, Fainting Goat Coffee that's really good. If you're into live music, I'd probably try to see what's playing at the Ryman downtown Nashville and take you to a show there. Just kind of depend on what you're into. If a team you loved was playing the Titans, we could go to a game in Nissan Stadium. Although right now, not many people are allowed to go see those games, but we could. In less pandemic-y times, we could probably go do that. But I tend to stay. You understand being a dad when you have kids, and when I spend so much time on the road that when I'm home, I really like to be home.
I've honestly heard that about not only people that are in, traveling with bands and we're going to get into some of the work while you're traveling with these bands, because honestly, I think that's really important to talk about. But I don't know him personally. I have met him, but I don't know him personally. But I've heard when Toby Mac gets off the road, that's immediately what he wants to do. He doesn't want to go anywhere else. He wants to go home and be with his family. And to me, that's a true testament of how much he cares about his family, how much he obviously loves his wife, and all of that. So how
tired we are.
And probably how tired you are of living on the bus and going hotel living. Yeah. I would imagine, right?
It can be a problem because my wife's idea of decompressing, like her idea of a good time is let's load up a suitcase and let's go somewhere and go to a hotel and cash in some of those loyalty points and have room service and just get away. It doesn't even matter where, just go somewhere else where we're not making the bed or cooking the meals or doing the dishes. Like, that's her idea. Just go somewhere for a night maybe of pampering. And that's just not like that's not a good, like, hanging out with her is my idea of a good time, but getting in another suitcase and checking into another hotel is just feels like work.
All right, so I can't even believe I'm sharing this with you, but I feel like it relates to your situation a little bit. Okay, so indulge me if you will. So my wife and I just celebrated 19 years this last summer, so we're obviously super excited about that. Thank you. So we're in this little community, and really it's not so little anymore, but it's called Bend, Oregon. I don't know if you ever made it out here.
Yeah, I've been there.
Okay, you've been to Bend. Obviously, it's kind of this, metropolis, if you will, metrosexual kind of place, right? So my wife says, let's get pedicures. And I was like,
Done that.
nah. I was like, nah, I don't. No, we're not. No, you can. I'll chill. I'll do whatever. I'll check the scores. There wasn't any scores at that time because it was August, but nonetheless, I don't know. I surf eBay, whatever it may be. And she goes, no, I want you to do it with me. Come on, let's do it. And I'm like,
You enjoyed it.
so she said, she's going to hear this and just probably punch me. But she said at one point, she looked over and she wanted to snap a picture of me because I had this face on that she's never quite seen before, of just pure relaxing and just nirvana, if you will, and not smelling like Teen Spirit nirvana, but you know what I mean, nirvana. But anyway, I just wanted to share that with you, and I don't know why.
I've only done that once, and it was with my wife. Same deal, where she said that was her. And I thought, hey, whatever you want to do, we'll go do something together, and that's what she wanted to do. And I didn't tell her, but I really enjoyed it.
Will she listen to you on this? Because if so, I'll send it to her. Oh, well, I'm going to email
You won't
her.
now.
I'm going to get her email and I'll send it to her. Anyway, so Shaun, you're awesome already. I'm loving this conversation. So let's talk about you for a second, because I'm sure we did not come to talk about pedicures and sports teams and, North Carolina, even though it's amazing school. But
I would rather do that than talk about me, but you're
well,
in charge.
I know that, right?
I'll go where you lead.
All right. I appreciate that. So imagine just for a second, because I know you travel a lot, right? Maybe you're a first class guy. Maybe you're a coach guy. Maybe you're an economy. I don't know. But I don't know.
Definitely a coach guy.
Coach guy. All right. Fair enough. So imagine just for a second, right? We're taking a plane ride to, I don't care where we want to go, just anywhere. We're going somewhere for maybe an international flight, because I know you do a lot of international travel. So let's say we're going to, let's say El Salvador, right?
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of a ways away, not only for me, but for you as well. So we get on the plane. We don't know each other, just like we didn't know each other at the start of this. But we sit down next to each other. And I lean over to you, and before you put your Beats on or your AirPods in or whatever you're jamming to, and I look at you and I say, hey, man, like, who are you? Like, how would you define yourself, or how would you want others to see you in that moment? Like, how do you do that?
Well, the question that the more common question you get, people don't normally ask, who are you? But they'll ask.
I do, because I'm that aware. Yeah, what
People
do you do
go,
for a living? That is
what do
true.
you do?
Yeah, what do you do for a living? Yeah. What are you on this plane for?
I never tell people that I normally tell people I'm a public speaker. And then they'll say, what do you speak about? I'll say, well, and I'll tell them about whatever I'm going to. Well, I'm going to this conference, and I'm speaking on behalf of a nonprofit that cares for children born into poverty. And like, oh, what is that? And I'll tell them, what do they do? And usually those kind of questions. My father-in-law was a pastor, and he taught me very early on, nothing will shut down a conversation faster than telling a stranger that you're a pastor or a minister or you're in ministry, just because people have all of these attached ideas. And those may be like really great ideas. And some of it might be a lot of hurt or skepticism, or whatever famous pastor was recently in the news for doing whatever thing he shouldn't have done. And so I never lead with that. But so, yeah, I would normally just tell people I'm a public speaker. And then people are usually pretty fascinated by that, because public speaking is still the number one fear in America, which is job security for me. So people usually have all kinds of questions like, how'd you get into that? And, and so then it kind of leads to backstory. But
yeah, I totally get what you're saying about the pastor thing. In fact, our pastor at our current church that we're at does not introduce himself as pastor so-and-so. He will always introduce himself by his first name. Hi, I'm Don, right? And so so that to me is such an idea shift, because the church I grew up in, no disrespect to this man, because he's a tremendous man of God, but he has always introduced himself as, I'm Pastor Lee.
Yeah.
And to me, I've never seen anybody push back on that, but I have seen walls come up, not like the physical walls, but almost like this wall of, we all know what I'm talking about, but this wall that comes up for people. So no, I totally agree with what you're saying.
When we've moved to, I guess this is the third home we've had since we moved to. I got married. I graduated college, got married, and moved to Nashville all within the same month, way back in 1997. And so this is the third neighborhood we've been in that time. And every time, it's not like I'm actively trying to keep a secret who I've been or who I am, but there's always a moment where neighbors find out, my backstory, and then it changes. And so that neighbor no longer comes over and offers me a beer, or he says, dang it, instead of what he would normally say. And it just becomes artificial. And I get that. I totally get that. But I don't know. I so enjoy like what you and I are doing right now. We're getting to know each other, and I'm getting to see some of who you really are. And hopefully you get to see some of who I really am, that I just don't want to put up a unnecessary barrier. So
Yeah. So do your neighbors Google you? like how do they know the backstory?
Like in this neighborhood we're in now, I guess we've been here about 4 years, and nobody really knew, like they knew I traveled for work, and that I was a speaker for a nonprofit, but they didn't know my whole backstory. And then we had a neighbor, it's because a lot of my neighbors are, the community we're in is a lot of transplants. So there's none of the houses around me are families that are from this area. In fact, none of them are from the South. But then we had a neighbor move in across the street that's from Georgia, which is definitely the Bible Belt, and knew who I was and just recognized me on one of my trips to the mailbox, and then started telling all the neighbors. And then it just made things awkward,
So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like if this was a real scenario, you and I sitting next to each other on a plane, to be honest with you, because of your beard, I'm not judging. The beard's great, by the way. I'm not judging. Maybe because I can't make it cool as you're making it. But if I were to sit next to you on a plane, I don't know if I would have recognized you from your earlier years. I
have
would
a hat
have
on
recognized
right now as well. I usually do have a hat on when I'm traveling too, and I usually.
But your hair was so on point. I mean, it was amazing. It was good.
Well,
and
really
good.
Sure, there's definitely a look. And when I speak at a concert, I'll dress differently, and I speak at a conference, I dress differently. I mean, it's just different. But yeah, I don't think. I don't really know. The beard comes and goes. I don't like having a beard. My wife likes it. She's 4 years older than me, and she just never wants me to look my youngest. This is the second reason why my wife is not going to listen to this.
Sending it to her. I'm telling you, I'm sending it to her. I am sending it to her. So, I will find a way to get it to her.
So I don't like to have a beard, but she thinks I look 12 when I don't have a beard.
You do.
So
look,
I think
you do look
neighbor,
very young without it. I will say that.
I think
from a
that
guy's
neighbor might have seen me when I didn't have a beard. Oh no! I remember what it was. So she knew me from when I was a singer, but she had seen me within the last year before she moved here, speaking at a women's conference, and had made the connection then. So she knew what I looked like now. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like if she hadn't seen me since like 2001 or whenever I started in music, there's no way she'd recognize me now.
Well, I guess
I'm a older, grizzled, very different looking guy.
Montana man, if you will. That's what I'm going with. Not the Unabomber. Ooh, I don't even believe we referenced that. But no, I guess that's what I'm trying to say is that if I were to look at you in comparison to when you first started in music, there's no way I would have been able to pick you out. Now, if you sang something, I probably could have been able to point that out. And I guess the reason why I'm asking that is when I was a kid, I was really blown away by magic, and I still am. Like magicians, David Copperfield, right? Things like that. The movie, Now You See Me, that kind of thing. I'm always blown away by that. And so when I was thinking about this new direction that we're in, is I thought, man, how do people see us? And how do people perceive us just from our outward appearance? How do people begin? And I don't care who you are. You got to be honest here when you ask yourself this question. Do I really judge somebody by the way they look? Do I immediately judge somebody by their outward appearance? And I think we do.
Yeah.
And I think I'm guilty of it. I look at somebody, I looked at you today and I thinking, man, this is not the guy whatever. And I'm not judging from a negative standpoint, from a point of judgment, but a point of, just again, we make that outward appearance. Like you immediately saw the North Carolina stuff. You probably already have preconceived ideas of who I am. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I'm stretching there, but
No comment.
yeah, thank you. Nice. No comment. So I want to ask you this question, and it's honestly, it is a word that I have struggled with for a lot of years. Now, for those that don't know, I grew up in the church. Shaun did as well. But the word I'm struggling with right now, and I'm really hoping you can help me with this, if you can be the Bible teacher for a minute. Can you put on that hat? I know you have a hat on, but maybe put on a different hat. I can send you a hat if you want. It's light blue. It's really awesome. It's kind of Titans color. Anyway, the thing I'm struggling with is, what does it mean to be a Christian to you?
Well, so you and I both grew up in the same denomination.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of
Southern Baptist, Catholic. Wait, Southern Baptist. Sorry.
So being a Temple of the Golden Monkey.
Yep.
And so being a Christian in my childhood was as simple as admit that you're a sinner and claim the forgiveness that's available to you through the death and resurrection of Jesus. The way we would say it, though, was to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior.
Did you say even personal Savior?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was that idea of, accept Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior. Yeah. Okay. Can't leave out that word.
Yeah. That's the word I grew up around, was
the right
personal.
mantra.
So
You got to say it.
Yeah. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Okay.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt you.
A Christian literally means a little Christ. So someone whose life imitates Christ. Now, I don't see those as two separate ideas. The idea that I acknowledge my standing before God and that I am not holy. I am not righteous. I'm not perfect. And so God sent his son, the only one that could be, to live the perfect, righteous life I couldn't, and to die the death I deserved, and to kick death in the teeth on my behalf. And then becomes a bridge that the Bible says whoever confesses with their mouth that Jesus is Lord and believes in their heart that God raised him from the dead will be saved. But what it means to be saved to me is the bigger area where I would depart from my upbringing, which is that to be saved is so much bigger and better than what I was told as a kid growing up in church. That what the full extent of salvation that was explained to me growing up was that I am saved from the penalty of my sin and from the punishment of death. But no one told me what I was saved for, which is where the imitating Christ comes from. So I'm saved for a new kind of life. I am regenerated, to use a theological word. The Holy Spirit comes and lives in me and remakes me into the image of Christ. So I am over time becoming more and more like Christ. Specifically, I'm beginning to think, feel, desire, and behave more and more like Jesus. And I live as if Jesus is my king. And that means that I live in obedience to Christ and that my life reflects the thoughts, feelings, desires, and behaviors of Christ. So the short answer is a Christian is someone who has pledged their allegiance and their life to Christ as their king. He has forgiven and accepted them and is now transforming them and is through them making himself known to everyone. That's what a Christian is. It's not simply someone who repeats a prayer so they can go to heaven. It is a whole person allegiance to Christ as king. And then he comes and reigns and rules through me and transforms me. That's a Christian, which is way more exciting and incredible to me when you think about it, because it means I don't have to wait until I die and leave earth to experience Jesus as my king in heaven, but that right now Jesus is my king and gets through me to the rest of earth. That's mind-blowing to me.
No, I appreciate that. I think the struggle I run into is, and help me if I'm wrong here, please, but the word Christian only appears 3 times in the Bible. The word disciple, however, appears way more than 3 times. I mean, I don't know what the number is, but the struggle I run into is this word Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think so many people, and I'm just going to make a big statement, big bold statement, rather than a finite statement, but I believe people in general say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. Yeah, I believe in God. Yeah, I believe in Jesus. But they don't ever take those staircase steps, if you will, to quote your buddy Louis Giglio on mine, that one day maybe I'll get to talk to him about his amazing staircase issues, or message. But I say that because I don't feel like people take those steps necessary to become that disciple of Jesus. Could you maybe share that and how that fits into your journey?
I try to avoid talking about what other people like.
Ooh, good.
Other
Yes.
people have this. Other people are not good Christians because XYZ. I think part of being a disciple of Christ is to begin every conversation of Christian shortcoming with, okay, where am I in all of that? And I think absolutely for me, I tend toward the academic, toward the intellectual. That doesn't mean I'm smart, but I want to be. And so I, for years, and I still do, struggle with being a disciple of Christ or being a Christian about knowing more things about Christian history or about theology or about hermeneutics or whatever it might be. And that also isn't discipleship. But it is the hearing and the doing, right? So in Hebrew, if we could geek out for one quick second, in Hebrew, the word for hear, which you find in the Shema in Deuteronomy 6, it's the prayer that faithful Jews still pray twice a day. It starts with it's called Shema because the first word of that prayer is Shema, which is translated hear. But in Hebrew, there isn't a separate word for hear and obey. They're the same word. So in Hebrew, in Jewish thought, and Jesus was a Jew, the idea of hearing God is also the idea of obeying God. And then James talks a bit about that, right? So don't just be hearers of the word, but doers of it also. Faith without works is dead. Why? It's that if I've truly heard God, if I'm truly a student of what God is saying, then I'm also doing that. It's like if I tell my kids to go clean their room and then they don't do it, and I go, hey, I told you to clean the room. Like, I heard you. Then it's fair for me to go, well, you obviously didn't because you didn't do it. And in my own life, that is where that's the side of the road I fall off on, is to know a lot of things, to hear a lot of things that God has said or that people have said about God, but to not be a doer of that. And that's not me being a good disciple either, you know? So I guess if I'd summarize, when I was a kid, I went off on the other side of the road of, man, I got baptized and I said a prayer and I was really sorry. And I asked Jesus to come into my heart. So I'm just going to now do nothing until I die and I get to see him. And then I swung way the other side of, man, I'm fully engaged. I'm going to learn all the things. But now the temptation is to not do the things, to not be in a loving, obedient relationship with God. Does that make sense? That was a good question. I've never had to answer that before. So I feel like I kind of ran around the barn before I landed.
No, I think you did great. I of course, I never know what people are going to ask or how they're going to answer it. And I always love the different perspective on it, right? Because that's really what I'm gearing towards or really wanting. I just have, again, I've struggled with that. I've met Mormons and I've even met Catholics who have said, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. He's my Lord and Savior. He's my personal Lord and Savior. They've even thrown in that personal Lord and Savior word. So I just was curious, like, what your thoughts were on that. So speaking of church and, kind of your story of growing up in the Baptist church, much like I did. So you sang this song years ago, Just As I Am. And I know you have your own kind of version of it, but that was the song that I went forward to when I made my, if you will, my declaration of coming free and coming forward. If you don't grow up in the church, you might not know this, but there's an altar call a lot of times And so sometimes the pastor's in the front, and you go up and you know, maybe say this sinner's prayer, and, you know, bing, bam, bomb, you walk out with Jesus that day. And so that's kind of what happened to me. But that song was playing, not your song, but that song in the Baptist church was playing. But recently I was sharing with Shaun before we started that I was going on a Shaun Groves tour. I was listening to all of his old music, and you sang that song. And honestly, two things came to my mind was one, the going forward for me, but also my grandmother's church. That's how they ended their service every single Sunday. And I spent a summer with
that
her.
same song every Sunday.
Yeah, that same song, not your song again, but Just As I Am was the altar call every single Sunday. So I went there for a summer. She lived in Coos Bay, Oregon. And I went there for a summer, a lot of summers actually, but one summer in particular, every Sunday we went. I'm like, I finally looked at her and I said, Granny, that's what we called her growing up. Granny, I'm like, can they not sing another song? Like, I love this song, but there's so many others in your hymnal. Can't they pick a different one? She goes, our pastor really loves that song though. I was like, but it's convicting me every Sunday. She goes, so it's working. So I just thought I'd share that with you, just more of a funny than anything else.
Wow, every Sunday.
Every single Sunday. And then you probably know this guy, Chris Tomlin. Our church for a long time sang the song Good, Good Father every single Sunday. And I can't stand that song. No disrespect to Chris, but I can't stand that song now. So anyway.
It's not originally Chris's song, so.
Okay, well, good. I was going to say, I don't know if you know Chris, or if you have a way to get in touch with him, just tell him I'm sorry that if I offended him. I don't know if he ever hears this. So, but going back to this, talking about Christianity, growing up in the church, what things do you think really helped shape your identity and really who you are and the man you are today?
Oh man, that's too broad. Can you be any more specific? I mean,
Sure, I can.
I mean, I'm really not trying to obfuscate here, but like every moment of every day is shaping you somehow, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, is there a moment in your life that you can pinpoint maybe that really kind of helps shape and define who you are? Maybe a moment. Maybe we can narrow it down to a moment.
There's so many.
Okay. I didn't know it was so broad. I thought
like you, my mom was heavily involved in childcare. My mom was a director of a very large childcare center, 150 to 200 kids. And she did that for 27 years, 12 hours a day. And so growing up with so many kids around me and seeing my mom care for other people's kids, a lot of those kids were having their childcare paid for by the state of Texas. So they came from all kinds of backgrounds that were different from mine. My town was my side of town was overwhelmingly white. And my town was quite overtly racist at times. But I had the rare opportunity of being a white kid with friends who weren't all like me and didn't all come from middle-class backgrounds like I did. And to see my mom care for people who looked different and had very different backgrounds than mine probably shaped my early self in more ways than I realized. There were things that were normal to me that I didn't realize weren't normal to other people until I left home. There was just compassion, generosity was just baked in at an early age by my mom. My dad was a soldier. He was in Vietnam, and then he was an instructor, taught the trigonometry that you need to aim artillery, and really bright, really sharp guy. And he shaped me as far as work ethic and giving me a desire to learn. So I don't know if I had to go back to one thing, it'd probably be just the parents that I was given, that I grew up with a mom that had such a strong, was so led by her heart and by compassion, and a dad who really balanced that well with his mind and don't just feel something, but do something. He worked hard and modeled that for me. So I think that was an unusual thing about my upbringing, that I had such balanced parents. I had a picture of both those two extremes, I guess, and they came together in me somehow. And that I think I can look back at just the parents God gave me as probably the biggest thing that shaped who I am.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I'm sorry it was so broad, but most people are like, man, I can narrow it down. So that's good that you were able to do that for us. So with that, do you think that is a key component maybe we're missing, not to get too political, but do you think that's a key component that we're missing right now in this world really is a mom and dad being at home, kind of providing that community, that sense of work ethic, that sense of empathy? Do you think we're and nurturing, do you think we're missing that?
I think we're missing a lot of things. I'm not educated enough, knowledgeable enough to say what we're missing more. I think that's certainly important. You know, when I was in college, while I was in college, I also worked part-time at a children's home, a denominational children's home, about 250 kids who were kind of at their last stop before some sort of juvenile program. Some of them were waiting to be rejoined with parents, but that wasn't the norm. Or they were refugees from other countries, and we were their shelter until they could be rejoined to parents. And so I definitely know from having such great family and from seeing as early as in college the holes in our spiritual and mental health that can be left when we're without parents, one or both. That I definitely think that they're important. My youngest son is adopted from India. Most children who are orphaned are orphaned by poverty. 4 out of 5 are orphaned by poverty. Mom and dad aren't dead, but they aren't able to care for their child. So I know firsthand as well, just as the father of an adopted child, that even though I'm in his life, there is something missing there, not having that connection to his birth parents even. So yeah, moms and dads are, I think, marriage and parenting are two of the most used analogies for God's relationship to us for a reason. And that when there's hurt or there's separation with parents or in marriage, it is fracturing and it hurts the whole person. So what a beautiful thing that God points to himself as the father of the fatherless and as the groom to a waiting bride, that he can meet our whole, the needs of our whole self, even if they haven't been met by, those needs that haven't been met by humans here on earth.
No, I love that. And I think that's why I was asking that question, is just the idea of, I know your work with compassion and I'd love to know maybe more of that story. So we'll get to that momentarily. But to me, I think right now where we are, what's been going on, not only with the pandemic and everything else like that, but I just think hopefully this pandemic has taught us that we need to love our kids more. We need to love our wives more and husbands more, because we now have this freer time, that we don't have all these distractions. We don't have North Carolina basketball. That's not a distraction, for the record. But you know what I'm saying is we
it's
don't.
A religion.
Well, perhaps. And religions are bad. But my point being is that I think everything slowed us down. And I think in doing so, I think hopefully it caused some of us to learn this lesson of, hey man, I got to get back to loving my kids better. I got to get back to loving my wife better, husband better, whatever it may be. And so, I just was,
I don't want to be awkwardly vulnerable, but I'll just be as transparent as I can be. That has been both it's been a good and a bad thing for me about the pandemic. I've been out of work since March. I won't go back to work until December. So I'm home a lot. And man, have I enjoyed reconnecting with my kids, and with my wife. And it's been difficult to, even though I try to balance my work travel with being home, and I feel that I do that well, and I'm constantly checking in with my wife and my kids. Hey, how are we doing there? It has been hard to be home and to I guess there's been some regret that has set in at times of, even though I've really tried to balance, regretting so much the times when I haven't been, and I've even gone as far as to go, man, is there something else I could do that I'm truly gifted at and called to do that would allow me to spend even more time at home? Um, because man, it has been so life-giving for me. And so like I'm so thankful that I like my kids and I like my wife. Like, it's one thing to love these people we call family, but I actually really like them. Like my teenagers are all people I would want to hang out with if we went to high school together. Like, I really do like them. I like them. And that's not what all my friends say about their teenagers. So I realize, and so it's been a lot of fun. Like, I really don't want to go back to work so much that I have really honestly thought, is there something else I could do? Is there some other kind of meaningful work I could do? Because I don't want to give this up. Isn't that weird? Like, I don't want to give up being locked down.
Get you a shirt.
Might be the only one feeling that way.
Get you a shirt, blast and lockdown at the same time. I don't know. Nobody, and honestly, Shaun, thanks for being vulnerable there. I appreciate that. That's always great when guests are feeling comfortable enough that they can share, obviously more of their heart. For me, I'm with you on that. I've been home since roughly same time period, end of March. I work for a Fortune 500 company. And so, I'm still working from home, and my wife and I a year ago turned the room that I'm sitting in into, I call it Sky Studios, because the walls are blue, the ceiling's blue, and of course you see all the North Carolina stuff, and it's made podcasting obviously really fun. And then when they were like, hey, you have to go home and work, I was like, man, it's awesome. I get to work out of my studio every single day. And I'm like, and then I was at a men's group last night and they were like, hey, how's things going? I was like, I need some more friends. I need some more friends. Do you want to come over and have lunch? Like, should we have coffee together? My 13-year-old also is, because here in Oregon, we're doing home learning too, creative learning or whatever, learning online, whatever you want to say. So she's Zooming. Well, I'm going to just tell you. So again, I was saying about doing the Shaun Groves tour. I was listening to Twilight yesterday and I was singing because I just got AirPod Pros and I was singing Twilight apparently too loud because I made it onto her Zoom class. And so I got a text.
Do I get streaming revenue from
I don't
that?
know. It was on Amazon Prime, so you might want to look into that. But I was singing it apparently so loud that I made it into her Zoom class. So she sent me a text. She said, Dad, I can hear you singing. Stop. So I just want to share that with you. So speaking of that, I want to tell you a story. Back around 2003, I think it is. This is the time period I came across that song Twilight, and I don't know where I was in life, but it was not a very, rainbow, blue sky, zippity doo dah, no worries in my way kind of day. It was a really dark period, and I wish I'm not a journaler. I should have been, but I've never been. Should probably start, but because I can't tell you exactly what happened. But I can tell you I was in a very dark place, and I came across your song. I actually bought it on iTunes, and I actually tried to go back and find out the date I bought it on iTunes, but I don't know how to do that. I've tried, and I almost emailed Apple because we're really good friends now. Apple and I are. But I almost emailed him because I was like, I need to know when I purchased this date, and I need to know it now because, we were meeting today. But I listened to that song. I'm not kidding you, for a week straight. Every time I went anywhere, anytime I ran, anytime I did anything that I was one-on-one, I listened to it, and I listened to it on repeat. And your song in that moment spoke to me so much. I got to ask you, like, where were you at when you wrote that song? Like, where were you? Could you take me there? Are we able to go there? Is that too vulnerable? I don't know, but help me with that.
No, it's not. I was working with the youth at our church, not in a staff capacity, but just small. Our large youth group would break into small groups, and I was with one of those small groups. And it was just a really good conversation one day about whatever it was we had talked about, and the conversation turned to, am I really saved if I'm sinning? Because there's this verse over here in this one part of the Bible that says, if you go on sinning, you're not really a Christian. But yeah, there's this verse over here that says we're saved by grace through faith, and they were just really wrestling with it, which is, how amazing is that 15-year-olds are even thinking about those things. And, it was just causing a lot of worry. And so I said, I don't want to rush to answer. Let me think of the best way to talk about this, and we'll come back next week and talk about it. And so we did, and we just went through Romans 7, where the Apostle Paul, who is obviously saved, to use the terminology that a lot of us in the Bible Belt use, right? He was obviously a follower of Christ, allegiant to the King. And yet here he is in Romans 7 saying, why do I keep doing the stuff I don't want to do? And why the thing I want to do, I just don't do. So we talked about our original nature, our sin nature, and about that process of God coming up and taking up residence inside of us, and then changing who we are. And that battle that Colossians says is like a civil war, this battle that happens between the Spirit of God and our own flesh, our own desires, our own psychology, our own upbringing, that battle that happens in us. So it really wasn't written from a place of I was struggling with that at that moment. It was written as a lot of times, if I was studying the Bible to teach it to other people, sometimes like a song would start in my head. And so just this idea of us being in this weird in between, where we're not totally in the day, and it's not night anymore either. The sun is coming up, as some theologians have said, we're in the already and the not yet, and trying to figure out how would I even explain that to a group of teenagers. And I never actually sang it for those teenagers. We just talked about Romans 7 and went through that, but that's where it comes from. Now, the idea for Twilight, though, to be the main idea of the song, came from my oldest daughter, who's now 19. She was a little bitty thing, and we were sitting in the front yard playing, as we would do in the evening, and the sun was going down, and she could also see the moon, and it freaked her out. The sun and the moon are not supposed to be in the sky at the same time. So it just so happened, and I don't think this is coincidence, God's weird timing. I'm thinking through Romans 7 and how do I explain this idea at the same time that my daughter is freaking out that it's both night and day at the same time. Sun and moon don't belong in the same sky. She knew that wasn't right. It's just like we know there's something not right, like Paul did. Why am I not the person I really want to be? So that's the long story. Sorry, it's not.
No, that was great.
Professional. That happens a lot in life, and my songwriter friends talk about it too, where you just have a life experience that coincides with something you're thinking about. Like, it's just weird how.
I think that's a Holy Spirit moment. I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think so.
Okay. Just checking. The lyric I love, and I wrote it down because I was going to forget. So here's my sheet to prove my chicken scratch
sheet.
writing. But it says, Savior sinner mingled in vain. And I might have gotten that lyric wrong. But
mingle in my veins.
Yeah. Mingle in my veins.
Saint and sinner. Yeah.
That to me was very poetic, by the way. So that was awesome. That was great writing there. So I just butchered it. So.
Yeah, and I've actually gotten some pushback from people on that song over the years. There are certain denominations of American Christianity that would not say that that's true.
Well, that's
but
their
again,
perspective, right?
I just go back to Romans 7. I don't think any of us are doubting whether Paul was really a Christian
or a disciple of Jesus. My word.
There's Paul saying he messes up too. So yeah. I take great comfort in that.
That's awesome. Alone. That's awesome. So I know I want to wrap up a little bit, but I do want to get to two more things specifically. I know you've struggled, and you've openly shared that with us, that you have struggled with some clinical depression. So When did you first recognize that, and how did you combat that challenge?
Mm.
of coming over that?
Well, it goes back to around age 12 in the 6th grade. I have a very vivid memory of it. It's going to sound weird the way I'm describing it. It really, I'm sorry, I'm trying to condense. Depression for a
Don't worry
lot of
about it.
people, not for
If
everybody,
yeah,
can
if you,
actually have a physical. It can manifest itself physically. In other words, it's not just an emotion. It's not just you feel sad. More oftentimes, people feel nothing. And for me, I remember being about 12, 6th grade, Miss Armstrong's algebra class, which was a horrible thing anyway. And I remember just having this deep sorrow, not about anything in particular. I wasn't sad about something that had happened or something I thought might have. I was just this crushing, deep sadness, and everything physically got dark. Like it was like I put on sunglasses. And I just thought I don't know, you're a teenager, you're hormonal, things are weird, you don't sleep well, whatever. I didn't think anything of it. That kind of thing happened to me every 2 to 3 years and would last a few days and go away. When I was in my 30s, I had a prolonged period of that, but of much more severe, where my legs felt heavy. It really felt like I had a toddler around each ankle. My bones ached. Psalm 42 is the best description, where David is talking about his bones aching, and he's like a deer panting for water. He's just desperate, and he's asking his soul, "Why are you downcast? There's no reason to be. Why?" And so that to me is the difference between sadness or grief and depression, is that it's not usually attached to an event. You're not sad about something, and it's more than sadness. It can be a whole body experience. Parts of my brain don't connect, and so I can't read and understand what I'm reading, and I love to read. I'm sitting in a room right now with 500 books, and I can't read them and make sense of them if I'm in the depths of it. I can't read the Bible. My wife has to read it to me. I can't pray. My wife feeds me line after line to repeat after her so I can even talk to God. The only thing that I can do when I'm severely depressed is to play the piano and sing. So I sing hymns. And that's where my version of Just As I Am came from. It was me singing to God. And that third verse, just as I am, poor, wretched, blind, sight, riches, healing of the mind, yea, all I need in thee to find, O Lamb of God, I come. So the short answer to how I combat, so I was diagnosed then by a physician with recurring clinical depression in my 30s. I haven't had an episode in 9 years, so now I'm much better about sleep, exercise, um, being aware of what I'm feeling, and dealing with that in a healthy way, especially watching out for anger. I have a therapist that I saw for regularly for weeks, but now I just check in once a year, just a maintenance visit. Prayer is huge. I learned that small things we do in the physical realm, like to pray or to give thanks, become atomic bombs in the spiritual realm. I don't think depression is purely a spiritual problem. I don't think it's purely a physical problem, but I think those lines are very blurry. And so for me, when I'm in the depths of depression, it's like I'm a wounded animal and the lion comes to devour me. That's when the lies and the accusations and the half-truths come swirling in my head, when I'm weak and wounded. And so community, prayer, diet, nutrition, exercise, all of and therapy, and medicine if you need it, all those things have literally saved my life.
Wow, thank you. Um, when you shared that with us on our forum, I was just like, man, really? Like again, I'm looking at this person that I watched and listened to back in 2003, 2004, somewhere in that time frame, and now we're obviously in 2020 and maybe even 2021. And so for me, it was so reassuring and almost like trusting again that you are allowing us to have that piece of you. And to me, that was just really awesome. And I love that you trusted us enough to be that vulnerable again. I just respect that about you tremendously.
Well, thank you for asking. Bad things grow in the dark, and there's huge stigma and a lot of really horrible, completely unbiblical theology around depression. When I first had my first major bout in my 30s with it, someone gave me a book to read, and that was the most hurtful thing they could have done. It was written by a Christian pastor I definitely love and respect, but it was so incredibly bad. It was just essentially blaming depression on living. It's the consequence of living in sin that's unconfessed or unrecognized, or it's the consequence of not living a life that has significance and purpose. And it's basically, if you're sinful or you're selfish, that's why you're depressed. But I was, I was speaking full time on behalf of a nonprofit that releases children from poverty and introduces them to the hope only found in Jesus Christ. I had a very meaningful, significant career, life, calling, whatever you want to call it. And if I had any problem as it relates to sin, I often feel guilty for things I haven't even done. So there was no like, I'm not aware of my sin and keeping it a secret. I just think there's a lot of horrible, bad, not biblically supported theology out there. And so thank you for even asking me. So, if sharing that can make just someone a little braver, the one thing I want to say to anyone listening who's struggling with any mental health issue is to dare to tell one person who loves you. Tell that one person. It really disarms mental illness, because mental illness tells you that you're not really lovable and you're all alone, and you're not. So dare to tell somebody, and then I pray that person is wise enough to help you take the right next steps.
No, I love that. And again, it's, I don't want to say it's my pleasure that I allowed you to share that. I mean, that seems weird to say, but I'm glad we were able to give you an opportunity to share that, because again, I think it's important. I think especially during this pandemic, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't have any stats to back this up, but I think depression, suicidal thoughts, I think all of that has been elevated during this pandemic because so many people
on the rise.
People have been so alone and isolated. And of course, with churches being shut down, so many churches have been shutting down. You don't have that community, that battle buddy that maybe you can reach out to on a consistent basis. So
and we know some people who are more prone to depression are people who are in jobs that we would classify as emotional labor. So your first responders, your doctors, your nurses, counselors and therapists, and pastors. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine being a pastor right now?
No, thank you.
Splitting over whether to mask or not to mask. I mean, you're getting it.
Whether to meet, not to meet. Yeah.
You're getting it from all sides. Yeah. And just the level of appreciation and gratitude and love shown to pastors is so often smaller than the amount of criticism and griping that comes. And it's just a depleting job, and they're much higher risk for this kind of stuff than the rest of us. So
yeah, you did a talk one time on Moses and all of that, and them at the base of Mount Sinai. I love that talk that you gave a while back about just them being whiny, cry like babies almost. You didn't call them babies, but they were being babies though. So
sure.
That was a good talk. That was a good talk. So so I want to ask just one last question, then I want to get to compassion, because I do think that's important. So here's my last question. Do you remember where you were the first time you heard any of your songs on the radio? And what you felt like when you heard it for the first time, maybe?
Oh my gosh. It was I was in the car with my wife,
Was it like
and
K-Love or something that came on, or were
whatever, it was Way FM here in
okay,
Nashville.
Way FM. All right.
They were the first station in the country to play Welcome Home. So many stations wouldn't play it, all kinds of reasons. It was too long. It had an intro and an outro and a bridge, and why is it, you know? And Way
And it's a
FM took a
gorgeous
risk,
song.
and they took a risk and played it. And man, because we were really all panicking. My label and I were panicking, like, man, if they don't play this, like, we're dead, we're dead in the water.
That's a sign of the music business, right? Because it really depends on
At the
radio
time, you
airplay
didn't
at the
have
time.
you didn't have all the other avenues we have. Like, you had to be on the radio. If you're
Right.
not on the radio, then people don't even know you exist to buy your music or to ask you to come sing at their church. And so whatever message you feel God has given you for the church doesn't get out. I mean, they were the gatekeeper radio stations. There was no way around it. There was no such thing really as a successful independent artist in those days. And so, yeah, I just remember this huge feeling of relief, like, oh, okay, finally somebody tried it. And, and, and also just, I couldn't believe it. I was just this band nerd who moved to Nashville hoping to maybe co-write some songs for other people. And here's a song that I was singing. Like, I didn't want to be an artist. So
Right. Weren't you working for like Caedmon's Call or something? Like you were writing music for them or something?
I pitched a few songs
Okay. You
to
pitched a
their
few.
label for them. Their label asked me to, do you have any of that kind of stuff? And so I sent over some things. Welcome Home was one of those. And they didn't end up recording any of it, but they were very encouraging. So I continued. But yeah, I didn't plan on being an artist. So the fact that I became an artist was already more than I had expected. And then to make an album with the amazing producer and musicians I made an album with was like, oh my gosh, this gets even better. And then for it to actually work, I mean, for someone to actually play it on the real live radio, it was so beyond my wildest dreams. I had no idea that would ever happen.
Did you ever watch that movie, That Thing You Do? It was a Tom Hanks
Yes.
movie. You remember
I
that
did
one?
not get out of the car and run
Okay,
around
I was
it
just
or do anything.
that's what I'm envisioning, like you running down the street to Patterson's, like.
But I turned it up loud, and we were just, we just couldn't believe it. I mean, my wife took a huge risk to marry me, just from can this guy care for us? Like, her dream was to be a mom. She was a CPA, she was an accountant, and she left a really great job. And when we began a family, and she was still working part-time, and there was really just honestly a lot of fear in the early days of our marriage of how long do I pursue this wanting to be a songwriter thing before we just quit and I'll go do something else. I'll go teach saxophone lessons or be a college pastor or something. Like, what am I? And so there was always I think a healthy amount of fear of, how do you know when you need to give up on the dream? And Nashville is full of people like that. The joke in Nashville is, how do you find an aspiring songwriter? Check, please. And that's who's going to bring it to you. So this whole town is like full of people just wondering, like, how long do I stick it out? And it had been 3.5 years for me trying. And then I signed a record deal. And then, so for the song to make it on the radio, it wasn't just, oh, wow, that is so awesome, people get to hear my song. It was really like a huge relief. Like, okay, we weren't crazy. We made the right decision to wait.
Do you ever go back and listen to old stuff?
I never go back.
Okay.
Someone recently asked me to do like an online concert for a charitable thing. And I went back and listened to just like, could I even learn this stuff again? And I decided not to do the concert. But yeah, I mean, I'm proud of some of it. Some of it is cringy, just because times change and styles change. And also, when you're Christian music is the only genre of music defined by its lyrical content. So you don't have a genre that's it could be any musical style, but it's what you're talking about that makes it a genre. And the thing is that lyrics become super important. And there's some things I wrote that I wouldn't say the same way, or I might disagree with now. And so that's really weird. You'll experience that years from now. You'll listen back on episodes of podcasts and go, oh, wow, I wouldn't ask that question now. Or I would have answered that person's question so differently. Or, oh man, I disagree with me now. Like, it just happens.
Or I can't even believe I was so broad with Shaun Groves. I had this moment with this, award-winning Christian music artist. I wanted to share one last song with you. Well, two last songs with you, and then I want to talk about compassion. But Better Days, I just listened to that one too, and that one is fantastic. The lyrics that you do in that one is really good. And then I was on YouTube, which is probably dangerous sometimes, but I was on YouTube, and somebody had set a montage of clips to the show The Mentalist, which I absolutely love. Like, that is my favorite show of all time. Like,
I've never seen that show, but
absolutely
I've seen it.
Favorite show of all time, hands down. Like, it was on Amazon Prime, and literally I binge watched it in like 3 weeks, the whole like 7 seasons. And my wife's like, "You're watching The Mentalist again?" I'm like, "I'm watching it till I can't watch it." She's
what
like,
song did they? It was a weird choice. Was it
Sad Song? It was Sad Song, and I was like, "Does Shaun know that they used his song?" And I'm like, "Did Shaun make this? Is she a fan of The Mentalist?" I gotta ask him about that. So that was my other little minor fan moment of asking.
I've never seen The Mentalist.
It's a good show. Do you like crime drama first?
This I didn't, but then COVID, right?
Okay,
so,
well, right.
I was not really much of a big watcher of anything, but I got into a friend recommended Broadchurch, which is a very dark, I think Netflix classifies it as slow burn, which just means it's a very slow paced British crime show.
Oh my gosh, British. Yeah, you lost me already.
So I went from that to it. Then it recommended Luther, which is another slow British crime drama with Idris Elba, and I liked it too. And now I'm watching Marcella, which is another British crime show. So apparently I only watch
British crime drama,
dark, slow British crime shows.
That's awesome. So
where there's like four shows in an entire season, that kind of thing.
Oh my gosh. So The Mentalist, I'll just real quick. So Patrick Jane is a psychic. He's tricked people. He's a charlatan, essentially. He's tricked people into thinking he's a psychic, but really he's just really good at reading people and really good at, assessing. Like, he could judge you based on your room and things in your room. So
it's psych, but not funny.
Psych, but not funny, right? And so then what's crazy about it is his family gets killed. His wife and daughter get killed by a serial killer by the name of Red John. And so he then goes to work for the CBI, which is the California Bureau of Investigation, which is like this make-believe, agency, obviously, step below the FBI. And he solves crimes for him based on just reading the room and reading clues and things like that. I
wonder why they chose my song, Sad Song, to
Well, because he's sad and he's like depressed. Seriously, like, he's sad and depressed through the whole series of the show because he's just focused on trying to find the guy that killed his family. And he walked into the room, and there's this red smiley face with their blood. Well,
they managed to take a very dark, sad song and make it even sadder.
Right, I know, and that's why I wanted to tell you
about original sin and 9/11.
Yep. Nope, that's not what it's about. Not on YouTube, buddy. Not on YouTube. All right. So last thing, first off, thanks for all the moments you gave us today. You're a fantastic human being. I'm so grateful for my friend Mary Snyder, who has an amazing podcast, Take the Stage. You guys, go listen to that. This is just a small plug because I love Mary, and Mary actually hooked Shaun and I up to be able to talk today. So I want to give her some kudos and some praise on that. So Mary Snyder, Take the Stage for speakers. If you're interested in being a speaker, go listen to what she's doing. She did not tell me to say that. Shaun did not tell me to say that either. But Mary's amazing. So Shaun, you work for Compassion. So in a nutshell, why on earth would you want to do Compassion if we can somehow get it in a nutshell? I don't know. But if we can't, no worries. But why did you want to do Compassion, and why should people maybe get involved in Compassion and what they're doing?
Well, Compassion International, and I'm not technically, I'm not a salaried employee or anything. I'm contracted to speak for them, though. I speak for them in 90 to 100 cities a year. I started doing that when I was recording artists. a lot of things that I said and sang, they felt like really fit with what they were about. So I reluctantly, as a total skeptic and cynic, went on a trip to El Salvador to see the work that they did, and I just came back convinced that they were everything they said they were, and that the work that they said they did was even better than what they had claimed. And essentially, what Compassion does is they invented child sponsorship in 1952. So all those other child sponsored organizations were all, Compassion was the first. And even though they're the oldest child sponsored organization, they're still the highest rated of their kind. When I say their kind, there's some organizations that take government funding. Compassion doesn't. There's some that work all different ways that you can work. Compassion works, though, through the existing local church. So all over the world, hundreds of local churches that have children in their neighborhoods that are born into families that earn less than $2 a day. Compassion partners with those churches to meet the psychological, the physical, the relational, the spiritual, and the needs of those kids. So every child Compassion cares for is cared for actually by a church and a pastor in that child's neighborhood. And that child receives education and health care and proper nutrition, clean water to drink, and always a Bible written in their own language and the opportunity to hear the gospel. So on average, 500 kids every day come to faith in Christ through the ministry of Compassion. I can't think of something of greater value that I could give $38 to every month. My family, we sponsor several kids. We sponsor a child for every one of our own kids. I want my kids from an early age to have that perspective shift that I lacked, to realize what they have, and also to learn as a little kid that your letters, your words, your prayers, and your generosity can be used by God to do very big things. Just because you're small doesn't mean you can't do big things. So sponsoring a child for each of my own children, allow my kids to be involved by writing letters and praying and reading the letters we get back. It's changed my own kids as much as it's changed other people's kids. So that's what I do now. I'm such a believer in what they do that every chance that I get, I'll go and speak on Compassion International's behalf at concerts and conferences, churches and colleges and universities all over North America.
Yeah, I was telling Mary that I have a compassion story, that our youth kids years ago when I was on staff, that they begged me to sponsor a kid. And I knew it was going to happen. I call it halftime of the show, right? Halftime of the Mary got a kick out of that too. She's like, halftime. I'm like, well, think about it. She's like, yeah, I guess it is kind of halftime, sort of. We call it intermission. Halftime works too. But I said, our kids years ago, our youth kids came up to me and were like, can we sponsor a kid? I'm like, no. Even before we got to the concert, I'm like, no, we're not doing that. But then when we got there, I saw them moved by what the speaker was sharing as far as compassion and what was going on. To me, it broke my heart. We did end up sponsoring a kid for a while in our youth ministry. So anyway, I'm glad that you're doing work for Compassion. And I know you're not getting paid to say this by Compassion. We're not partnering with Compassion in any way. You're just a guy that says, hey, man, they changed my life. They could hopefully change yours as well. I would agree, right?
Well, yeah, and going back to what we talked about a long time ago about what is a Christian, and you were getting to what is a disciple, a
Right.
follower of Christ. Right. And the Bible, so many references to justice, meaning to give everyone what God says they should have without favoritism or discrimination. And I think that's a mark of a disciple, that Tim Keller has said that justice, and he specifically means caring for the poor, is a grand symptom of a right relationship with God. That a person who has experienced God's provision for them spiritually knows what it's like to not deserve it, but to be loved and provided for by God, is just naturally compelled to joyfully be generous, to just see a need and meet a need. And that might not be through compassion, but a disciple is driven to do for others what God has done for them. So if I wake up and God has given me breakfast, I want to see that other people have food to eat today. I wake up and I have a closet full of clothes. Man, God compels me to go and to make sure other people are clothed. If someone, I'm so thankful they did, told me about the love of Christ, oh man, I am compelled. Like, you don't have to tell me to. I just really want to share Jesus with other people. So I think, just to bring the conversation full circle, to be joyfully, cheerfully generous with everything God's given us is definitely a mark of a true disciple of Christ.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We had a show, I'm trying to remember what episode it was, but we were in a search series called Search for Shoes, and we somehow got connected with Samaritan's Feet, and what they do is they go into third world countries and give kids shoes. They wash their feet, and then they give them a brand new pair of socks and shoes, and it's all coming out of the creator, or the I guess CEO. He came from Nigeria, and somebody had given him a chance to win a pair of shoes, all by hitting 10 baskets. I think he had hit 10 baskets in a row to get a pair of shoes. And his wife, we sat with his wife, so we didn't get him, but she tells the story just probably about as well as he does. But she says angels had come down to help Manny hit these 10 shots in a row so he could win the pair of shoes. Because in his village, nobody had had a pair of shoes. Yeah, so they did make him work for it. So anyway, so Shaun, how can people get in touch with you if they want to know more about you? And then I want to play a game with you if you're interested in that.
Shaun at shaungroves.com. My parents spell my name weird. It's SHAUN. So Shaun at shaungroves.com is one way to get hold of me. And then I'm just Shaun Groves on all social media.
It's the Norwegian way to spell Shaun.
Oh, is it? I don't know.
Well,
I think it's the Sean Cassidy way of spelling Shaun.
A friend of mine is also named Shaun. I have a friend in Texas, and he spells it SEAN. And then I have a friend, actually, he was the best man in my wedding. He spells it the same way you do. And his mom told me years ago, because I was like, why doesn't he have a W? Why doesn't he, why the H? I don't understand. And she goes, that's the Norwegian way to spell Shaun. So I didn't know if you knew that, but there you go. Food for thought.
I did not know that.
Fact checked me on that for sure. SHUN. All right. So, Shaun, this is our game called Senseless. It's a way we end our show. So, just so you know, it's really bad here for North Carolina. We got the North Carolina Cup here. So, are you going to be okay with this?
I'm fine with it.
All right. Here we go. So, I'm going to roll the die here because you are not in Oregon. You're in Tennessee, which, by the way, we can now put a pin in Tennessee, which I'm excited about. So, here we go. So you got a number 1, which kind of fits into what we're talking about. So here's proof that I did not cheat. Right. So people have accused me of cheating at my own game. Can you believe that? I don't even know what to say to that. Like, it's my game. How could I cheat? Anyway, so how do you want others to see you? I feel like we kind of answered that, but maybe more succinctly, how do you feel like others should see you?
How do I feel like they should see me? Oh, man. Well, I would ideally want people to see something of Christ in me. But specifically, like we talked about earlier, that they would see in my thinking, feeling, desiring, and behaving the thoughts, feelings, desires, and life of Christ.
All right. And would that be like your lasting legacy that you would want them to have for you? Yeah, I would. I think you would say, I think any dad would say this. I would want, someone, I wish I was smart enough to remember who said it, but that our children are the letters we write to future generations. I would want my kids to be my legacy. That we obviously aren't responsible for all the good or the bad in our kids' lives. But I would hope they turn out well and that they give me some credit for that. That's awesome. Well, Shaun, thanks so much for joining us today. Man, thank you. I can't say it enough. You were candid, you were funny, you were engaging. I hope you had a good time today. I don't know. I never know.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. It's our pleasure. Guys, I just want to remind you of this. It's so easy when we meet somebody to judge that outside book jacket. We just immediately start judging. We look, we think we know the person deep down inside. But my question to you today is this. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe you don't really know the person that you're seeing? That maybe there is more than meets the eye? Let that be your challenge today to really think about and really focus on as we end this week. So guys, just remember this: when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned till next week when we walk in other people's shoes. Thank you so much for joining me on Other People's Shoes this week. Want to thank you again for listening, and of course, always want to thank our guest, Shaun Groves. Thank you, Shaun, so much for coming on today, sharing your story, giving us a little taste of the treasures and gems that lay inside of you. And thank you so much for letting us just share in that with you. So, guys, if you want to know more about Shaun, we, of course, have linked all of his information in our show notes. So please, of course, go check that out now. Speaking of checking things out, want to invite you right back here next week. And in fact, here's a little sneak preview of next week's guest.
In the living room, and he kind of pushed me underneath an old stereo that was on 4 legs, and I could see the serial numbers underneath. And so I started just reading the serial numbers. That's all I could think to do, was just keep repeating the serial numbers over and over, just to think of anything else besides what was happening to me at the moment. And then once he crossed that boundary of having sex with me, he made it very clear that no one should ever know. And if I were to tell anyone, I'd be responsible for what would happen, and no one would believe me. And I can remember thinking, I don't even believe this is happening to me. Why would anyone believe me? And I cared about him. So that's the other thing you got to think about. This isn't some stranger, this is somebody that I had established a relationship with, and I cared about him. So I didn't want to hurt him. I didn't want to tell on him, so to speak. And I didn't want anyone to know that I had done this. I had just had sex with my pastor.
That is right. We're going to be going out to the great state of Ohio, and we're going to be sitting down with an author who has, in my mind, a very hard, challenging, but very inspiring story. And so hopefully you will make time to join us next Wednesday. That, of course, when this episode will be available to you at opspodcast.com. That, of course, is a great place to hear past, present, and future episodes. And, of course, while you are there, feel free, of course, to leave a voicemail and let me know what you think about the show. Let me know what you think about our past guest, or just whatever you want to say. That, of course, is available to you at opspodcast.com. And, of course, like us, follow us, tweet us at OPS Podcast Show under Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We, of course, would love to connect with you there as well. And, of course, just remember this. Remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Thank you so much for joining me, and stay tuned till next week when I again walk in other people's shoes.